This successful Oklahoma businessman is accused of trying to hire a hitman to take out two parents who he sold his house to more than a decade ago. At the center of this story is a lawsuit brought by those two parents and bats. A lot of bats. What the suspect in this case allegedly said that led police to stick him with a charge of first-degree solicitation, murder for hire. We're on the case, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. The home buying process is stressful, to say the least. If you've ever done it, there's a lot of money on the line. There's all these steps you have to take. Not only is it stressful if you're buying a house, but if you're selling a house as well. But rarely do we see cases where one party tries to allegedly hire a hitman to kill the other party, but that's what we're dealing with in this story. So to understand why the suspect, in this case, his name is Keith Cathey, allegedly wanted to kill a couple, you have to go back to 2015. It was on March 17th that Cheryl and Mike Fritts were on the hunt for a house in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The Fritts, they were young parents, they were looking for a place to raise their kids, and they found what they thought was the perfect spot, their dream home in the Tulsa area. The home was being sold by a man named Keith Cathey, and according to his LinkedIn, he was a successful medical device salesman, 7 times President's Club winner, according to his LinkedIn. Court documents show that Keith Cathey had listed the home in February of 2015, and it appeared that he finally found his buyers in the Fritts a couple months later. Now, court documents show that Cathey said that he wasn't aware of any issues in the home. Part of it reads that he wasn't aware of defects or conditions affecting the interior or exterior walls, ceilings, slab foundation, basement, storm cellar, floors, windows, doors, fences, garages. All looked good to him according to the documents that he signed. Now, if you've been through this home buying process, getting an offer accepted, that's really just the start of the process, because before you close, you have to do an inspection and you have to see if there is anything wrong with the home. Now, with no known issues to the house, the Fritts, they made an offer and bought the home from Cathey for $445,000. And the documents state that an inspection was done and it didn't have any major issues other than some updates needed on appliances. A report by exterminators also found no issues. Now, with everything looking good, the Fritts closed on their new dream home May 7th, 2015. And when you move into a home, there's going to be things that are going to come up that you have to fix or deal with that maybe you didn't realize during the home buying process. It often can happen. But nothing compared to what the Fritts say they went through within a couple days of getting into their new home. So 2 days after they move in, we're on May 9th, they say they found a pool of water on the floor of their home. And they also found seams and sills in the window. They even found dead bugs on windowsills in the living room and a room upstairs. Now, the problems did not stop there. The next day, which was Mother's Day, the Fritts saw water pouring into the house from the master bathroom. Then, as they were cleaning that up, the documents state that water started streaming into the living room of the house through a ceiling speaker. The next month, they saw more dead bugs in the bathtub of the home, and then Cheryl, the wife, she started getting an unexplained sunburn type rash. Let's go to June 9th. That's less than 2 months after they moved into this home, and they noticed a significant accumulation of fecal droppings on the patio. And when they found out what those droppings were, they realized they may have a bat problem. The documents state that the Fritts continued to deal with the leaking water and rashes for weeks. They hired an exterminator who found out those dead bugs in their home. They're called bat bugs, very similar to bed bugs. But then this house of horrors continued because the Fritts then started looking for bats to try and figure out how these animals were accessing their home. And the Fritts said they saw the bats coming and going from the house, and they could hear bats within the walls of the house. So they had a major problem on their hands. They said the issues with water continued into December when they saw water flowing into the home from a ceiling light. So the Fritts were not quiet about their problems. They went public. They welcomed local Tulsa TV station KOTV into their house to tell their story. The Fritts sued Keith Cathey in May of 2016. They accused him of not disclosing defects in the home, and they said that Cathey knew of the issues in this house when he sold them the house. They write that they found steel wool being used to block bat access points in the house, and they also found discarded ammonia containers in the attic, which is a way to treat bat infestations. A jury awarded the Fritts family $546,000 $500,000. And with the fees added, the total amount exceeded $1 million. This case went on for a decade, back and forth in appeals, but it was finalized in July of this year. Keith Cathey apparently did not take this well. And that is how we get to the point where he allegedly tried to hire a hitman to kill Fritts. Police reports show on April 17th, so this was before the lawsuit was finalized, Keith Cathey had a plumber over to his house. Keith now lives in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. That's a suburb of Tulsa. Now, this plumber had done work for Cathey before, police say, and he was finishing up this job and he was chatting with Keith Cathey. And that's when Cathey started to bring up some of the recent legal problems that he was having. And he tells the plumber that he just had a $1 million judgment against him. Hey, before I get back to this episode of On the Case, which is one of the most watched shows in all of YouTube, I need to take a moment and talk about our partner and sponsor, Morgan & Morgan, America's largest injury law firm. They have more than 1,000 attorneys, and they win a lot. They've recovered over $25 billion from more than 500,000 clients. And in the past few months, a client in Florida received $12 million after the insurance company offered just $350,000. In Pennsylvania, a client was awarded $26 million. That's 40 times the insurer's $650,000 offer. And another client in Pennsylvania received $29 million after being offered only $500,000. So even if you don't think your case is worth millions of dollars, why not fight for what you deserve? Morgan & Morgan makes it so easy to start a claim. You can do it with just 8 easy clicks on your phone. So if you've been hurt and you need to start a claim, go to www.forthepeople.com/OTC. You can also scan this QR code on your screen or click the link below. Cathey then allegedly told the plumber that he would give him $100,000 to kill the people who sued him. Now, at first, the plumber said he kind of laughed it all off, thought that Cathey was joking, maybe blowing off some steam. But then Cathey allegedly kept going. He allegedly said that he wanted the Fritts dead, and he continued to offer the plumber money. And at this point, the plumber said he felt very awkward, to say the least, and he believed that Cathey was serious about this threat. So he finished up his work, he left, and he calls police. Now, what Cathey maybe did not know is that the plumber said that his company gives him a phone. And the reason they give him this particular phone is that they require him to record all conversations while he is working, and that is for customer service purposes. So police say that they have the entire conversation that Cathey had with the alleged threats that he was making against the Fritts. Specifically, this is what Cathey said, quote, "These people sued me 4 years ago after I sold my bleeping house. They got bats in their house. If you know a hitman, I'd give $100,000 to have those people killed. I'm not even joking." He then claimed in the trial that he couldn't tell the jury that the Fritts bought the house from him 5 years before the lawsuit, but that claim does not line up with the information in the lawsuit because Cathey listed the house in 2015 and he sold it in 2015 to the Fritts, and then the lawsuit was filed in 2016, and then you heard all the issues that the Fritts family had within days of moving into the home. So Cathey is allegedly lying here to this plumber. Now, Cathey also said, quote, "Give me a call. I'm not joking. I'll give you $100,000 to save my life. I'm not joking. I've even asked homeless people. I'll give you $100,000 cash. I'll even take you to the place and drop you off." Then he says, quote, "I have thought about going and doing it. My wife cried and freaked out because she thinks I will go to prison." I'm like, well. Now, after this recorded conversation, police say they tried to pry more information from Cathey. An officer actually sent him an anonymous text message about his desire to hire a hitman. And when Cathey responded, "Who is this?" the officer just said he offered to help Cathey with his, quote, "bat problem." And Cathey responded saying, quote, "I'm good." On September 4th, Keith Cathey was arrested and charged with solicitation for first-degree murder. He was given a $200,000 bond, which he posted. The Independent newspaper was able to get in touch with Cathey after his release, and all he would allegedly tell them is that this entire thing was a big misunderstanding, but he wouldn't say more. I did reach out to the Fritts family, and they told me they're not commenting right now. They did give us the contact information for their lawyer, but we have not heard back from him. We did see in Oklahoma court records that both Mike and Cheryl Fritts filed emergency protective orders against Cathey. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Matt Mangino. Thank you for taking the time to be with us on Law and Crime. Fascinating case, very scary for this couple as well, I'm sure. You've read through the arrest documents as well as this lawsuit that goes back to the 2015-2016 timeframe. How strong of a case does it appear the state of Oklahoma has?
Well, based on the affidavit reading through the statements that the defendant made, he seemed, pretty affirmative that he was looking for a hitman to take out the buyers of his house because of a lawsuit that they were successful in. And one of the things that's telling is even as he was speaking to the informant, he said, "Hey, I'm not joking." He wanted to make it clear, "I'm not joking. I'm looking for a hitman. I'm willing to pay $100,000. I'm willing to drop them off at the house to carry out this," as he described it, execution. So those are pretty damning words in relation to this solicitation charge.
Yeah, because you read it, and at face value, I mean, that is exactly what it is. It is saying you're trying to buy a hitman. The motive is this lawsuit. Here's the couple. This is their address. I mean, it's one thing after another, kind of checks the box. At the same time, I think a lot of people could look and say, here's a guy with a handyman. I personally don't talk that way, but I know people who have quite the mouth on them that will say some stuff and blow off some steam. And he didn't know that he was talking to someone who would go to the police about it. How do you draw the line between just being really frustrated, you just got hit with $1 million lawsuit loss, and then at the same time being concerned that this guy might actually want to do this?
Well, yeah, you're right. It is a fine line, Chris. And I think that, one of the problems that the prosecutors may have with this case is in the affidavit, the investigator says that he reached out directly to the defendant and said, "Hey, I can help you, with this bat problem." And essentially the defendant said, "Hey, I'm good." So, is that indicative of someone who was blowing off steam and somehow got caught up in this situation with an informant? Or, is this someone who kind of renounced what his intentions were? So maybe at one point he was pretty fired up and he did want to do some damage to these people. It never came about. And then he kind of rescinded it later by saying, "Hey, I'm good," when he finally had someone who was responding to his solicitation for a hitman.
You're always a great person to talk to because you've been on the prosecutor's side where you've been building the case. And then now you're on the defense attorney side where you would have to defend someone like this suspect, Keith Cathey. If he was your client, I mean, how confident would you be in defending this case, knowing that the argument of, hey, listen, the guy's got a mouth, he doesn't speak the way a lot of people would like to speak. How would you see that type of argument going with the jury?
Well, just as I said, Chris, I mean, I would hit home on those 2 points with regard to defending this person. Hey, those weren't real threats. He wasn't really looking for a hitman. He's mad. He's kind of bragging to this guy that's doing some work that, I'm going to take these people out, or I'm looking for somebody to do it, or I'll even drive you there and do it myself. And the thing is, when you talk about, what is the motive here? Hey, there really isn't a motive. And I'll tell you why. Yeah, sure, he's mad at these people because they got this huge judgment against them. But killing them is not going to make the judgment go away. The judgment's still there, and that judgment would exist for their heirs to collect on. This isn't a situation where, hey, I want to take these people out and then I won't have to pay the money any longer. So you really have to try to drill down on that issue for the jury. And then, hey, when he had an opportunity, when someone called him and said, "Listen, I can help you with your bat problem," he said, "Oh, no, I'm good." He walked away from it. He rescinded his solicitation. So that's what I would drill home on with regard to this case.
And then going back to the prosecutor's side, because I could see the argument that there's more than 500,000 reasons that he would be really upset with this couple. I mean, that's life-changing amount of money to lose in a case that really sets you back. What's the argument if you're a prosecutor to say, listen, like that judgment may still have been there, but the rage over losing it, and then apparently he felt that it was an unfair lawsuit that played out against him. I guess how strong is that motive argument if you're a prosecutor going into the courtroom, if you were to say that the judgment was the reason that he would have wanted to do this?
Well, I think you can look at it in two ways. Number one, we'd have to look more closely at, what money is owed, how much has been paid, has anything been paid. But the other thing that I would pound away at from the prosecution standpoint is, hey, this is about vengeance. The judgment he's mad about, but he's just mad at these people because they drug him through court. He sold them a house, and now he owes them $1 million. So I would really say, hey, this is more about vengeance than just trying to evade paying this judgment. He wants to get even with these people for what they did to him, and he was actively seeking out somebody to harm them, to kill them. And the other thing that I would really emphasize is, hey, he had every opportunity during this conversation to say, I'm just mad, I'm just blowing off steam. No, he wanted to make it clear to the informant, I'm not joking. I'll pay $100,000. I'll drop the hitman off at the place where the killings are going to occur. That's not someone blowing off steam. That's someone planning a murder. And that's what I would pound home on if I was the prosecutor.
Now, if you're the prosecutor, you obviously have this conversation that he had with the handyman, who, it's just interesting reading the court document where he's like listening in to this guy who he's done work done for, and then it just seems to steamroll where he's like, I don't want to be part of this conversation. And that's certainly part of it too, where he just got uncomfortable with how he felt the defendant was very passionate about wanting to actually do this. What other pieces of evidence would you gather if you're putting this case together beyond just that conversation that they had?
Well, I would look to see people who are close to him, to the defendant, people that maybe he worked with, people that he hung out with, or did other activities with. Did he talk about this? Did he say this to other people? Did he actively solicit other people to try to kill the victims, the plaintiffs in this lawsuit? So that would be one place. A lot of legwork in terms of reaching out to people and trying to make some connections where you might have a consistent pattern of him reaching out or talking about carrying out these murders.
I know this case is taking place in Tulsa. You practice in Pennsylvania. What does a solicitation murder for hire charge typically, if you're found guilty of this, if this one conversation, it was just one conversation that he had with a handyman, if this is what ends up leading to a guilty verdict on this, I mean, what type of punishment could he be looking at, say if this happened in Pennsylvania?
Well, if this happened in Pennsylvania, he'd be looking at a first-degree felony, which is punishable by 20 to 40 years in prison. So this is a very serious offense, and one that could subject him to severe punishment if he was ultimately convicted.
And then as far as a plea deal, how would that go? I mean, he's just being arraigned today, so there's a long way to go. But typically in a case where maybe he is looking to make a deal, maybe he just doesn't, he truly in his heart felt like he was blowing off steam, it didn't happen, but they certainly have a lot of evidence against him. What's the process of figuring out what a plea deal could look like?
Well, Chris, as you know, we observe so many of these trials, and really what a plea comes down to, a favorable plea, is the strength of the case. So, how confident are prosecutors that they can prove this solicitation beyond a reasonable doubt? And how confident is the defense that they can defend this case successfully? So those factors all go into the mix. There are many cases in which prosecutors feel very strongly about their case, and there's no plea offer at all. You're not entitled to a plea offer in courts around the country. You can say, hey, you could plead guilty openly to the solicitation charge, and the judge is going to sentence you, and we're going to ask for the maximum, and you can argue whatever you want. That happens in cases. But truly, serious cases that prosecutors are very confident with, they don't even have to offer a plea bargain. In this case, then goes to trial, and the chips fall where they may.
What type of jury would you be looking for if you were defending this client in a trial?
Well, I would really want open-minded um, people. In a lot of situations, you know, defense attorneys are reluctant to put professional people on juries, teachers, things like that, because they really look at things from a lot of different angles, and they analyze things maybe a little more than others would. In this situation, I think I would like to have a more educated jury, people who are in professional positions who could look at this and say, hey, listen, we all say things we don't mean. We all blow off steam. Certainly, this guy's mad because he lost $1 million. But, was he really trying to get this plumber to find him a hitman? I don't think so. And without anything else to substantiate that, any other contact with other individuals, I'd want a jury to say, hey, listen, we've all been there. We've all said things that we didn't mean. If unless you can show us he's taken some other affirmative action to carry this out, we're not going to find this man guilty.
And I know that ignorance of a law is not a defense. But at the same time, how effective have you seen the kind of I was just kidding defense in some of these cases where a lot of the evidence is verbal?
Yeah, I mean that's a legitimate argument to a jury that there were, what else was done in this case to carry out this solicitation uh, to murder. So if I was a juror, I'd want to know, is this just a conversation that this guy had and he's mad and he's saying all these things that are unusual to a guy who's doing work on his house? Or did he have an account that had $100,000 in it? Uh, did he go out and buy a gun saying, I'm going to give this to whoever carries out this murder? Did he make plans? Did he case the house? Did they have him on surveillance driving around the house of the victims in this case? Making some plan to drop somebody off. I want to see more. And if I was defending this case, that's what I would be pounding away at. I want to see more. I read the affidavit. I want to see more than that if you're going to convict my guy of solicitation to commit murder.
And at this point, if they just have this conversation where he did, I mean, it was the greatest hits of what you would need when it comes to verbally saying that you want to hire a hitman to take somebody, if all of that is true. And for a case that could come down to perception of whether someone sees that he was genuine or he wasn't genuine, in those types of cases, I mean, what typically is the difference between a guilty verdict and a not guilty verdict and how a trial plays out?
Well, that's a great question. And, if I knew the answer to that affirmatively or confidently, I'd be defending a lot of these kind of cases. You could make a reputation doing that.
Fair point. Yeah.
But I think, what it comes down to in many of these cases is, juries are unpredictable. You don't know what a juror or a jury is going to hang their hat on. Oftentimes, both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, having tried cases, and you expect that a specific issue or two or three are really the most important issues in this case, and you want to drive those issues home. And then after a verdict, you go to individual jurors and say, what did you think was the most important thing? And they'll say something that you thought was unimportant or would not have any effect on this jury, and they hang their hat on that. So it's so difficult to predict, what a jury is going to do or what a jury thinks is important. One of the things that I think that will also contribute to this case is this informant. How did he feel when this conversation was going on? Okay, we know that he felt uncomfortable to the point where he stopped the conversation, but did he think, sitting there across from the defendant, that he was sincere in wanting to carry out the murder of these plaintiffs in the lawsuit? Did he? And he must have felt that way, because obviously he went to the authorities and obviously he stopped the conversation. I think that could be impactful to a jury.
And then just lastly, Matt, because we'll see some of these cases, and often we're talking about them when someone was arrested for trying to solicit a hitman, when in reality, and it could have gone this direction if he had answered that text message, where law enforcement plays the role of a hitman. And sometimes you see somebody where they're mic'd up and they don't realize that they're on a wire, and they say that they'll pay this amount of money to kill somebody. You see hitmen in the movies. In your experience, more on the prosecutor side, I mean, does the hitman actually exist in real life?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are certainly opportunities if you have the right, I say right, it could be actually say the wrong connections.
Sure. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are people out there that will carry out a hit, and not only that, there are people out there who are not professional hitmen who will attempt to carry out a murder because you're going to pay them for that. I mean, we saw that just recently in Donna Adelson's case. I mean, these weren't professional hitmen necessarily who came in to carry out the murder, but they were someone who said, "Hey, I can make a fast buck and get away with this," and that never works out well.
No, and I think that's probably the best part of it. It does not work out well. Matt Mangino, thanks for joining us. This is a really just fascinating case. Again, very scary for these victims, allegedly, in this case, and we'll see how it plays out. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Chris.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law&Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.